Oh, you put a time.
Okay, before we start, someone's lights are on, they have a Subaru. Did you?
Oh, that's right.
Don't mind.
Don't mind on the Subaru.
Oops. I'm Clayton, I'm an alcoholic.
Clayton.
Thanks for inviting me to speak. Yeah, so I've been clean a while. Sobriety date is June 24th, 1986. Yeah, 86, babies. June babies, 86. That's 13,738 days. I had to look it up. A lot of days. So what that means is I've seen the world change in my time. The first place where I went to meetings up in Bellevue is now the site of the Bellevue Library. And it's been the Bellevue Library for 25 years plus. The next place that I spent a lot of time in early recovery became a Granger and a Lowe's. And we'd be walking, I used to shop at the Lowe's, and we'd walk through Lowe's, and maybe we were getting sober over there in the garden section. And they tore the Lowe's down. So the Lowe's had a lifespan, and they tore it down. That's a long time to be sober. Outlived a Lowe's.
It is not.
It's a long time. When I got here, I was 24 years old, and the men that were sponsoring me at the time were old like me. I'm 62 now, and those guys were in their 50s and 60s, and now I'm that age. Taylor died with 25 years. I've outlived a few sponsors. Don had 30. Jay Ackney had 30. Five people that have heard my inventory have passed away and gone to the big meeting in the sky. That's a lot of people that have impacted my life in AA. And we're here in the beginning. I think when I got to AA, I think Bill Wilson was still alive. You might have to check my facts on that. I forget when he died.
71.
71? Okay. I'm wrong. But I believe there were some people in AA at the time who knew or had met him. That's probably true. So I'm not a big fan of drunk logs because my sober log is way more interesting. And it's way longer. I had an 8-year career with drugs and alcohol. I did not become an addict. I was an alcoholic and my drug of choice was weed. But I didn't become an opiate addict or a heroin addict, or it's not part of my story. I was about 3 lines of coke away from becoming a cocaine addict. If you gave the Pope enough coke, he would become an addict too. It's not a remarkable thing to become an addict. I was just fortunate enough to not go have that as my story. In early recovery, I recall saying many times to myself and anyone else that would listen that if I did relapse, I would become a heroin addict in about 2 weeks. Because at the end of my drinking, I was absolutely hopelessly suicidal. And I did not want to be here. I want to tell you 2 stories. The first night I drank and the last night I drank. And then I'm going to tell you what happened to me. The first night I drank, well, technically the first night I drank, I had stolen some sips of booze at Christmas parties as a kid. But the first official night that I drank, well, me and 3 other guys were 16, split a half case of Miller High Life. That was 3 beers apiece for math majors. And I had my 3. And those guys watched me drink them. And then we decided to drive a borrowed car to get some pizza. And I stole that car on my first night as a drinker. I stole that car and drove it out of the parking lot and around the block and back in. And when I got to AA, I read this. I was about 3 days sober, and I read this in Bill's story. It was very impactful. Bill's story was for me, and I want to read it to you guys. Page 3 of Bill's story. I didn't have to go very far into this book before I started to see myself in his story. He says, "My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. On that day, on my first night with my friends, they were lined up in front of me, and I was being chastised by other young men my age, 16, 17. You know, why did you do that? That's not even your car. You can't be stealing somebody's car and driving it out. You don't even have a driver's license. I'm being, the remonstrances are telling you what you've done wrong." And my buddy Bob, he says, "Clayton, day 1, if you like alcohol too much, you could become an alcoholic." Day 1. Fast forward 8 years, and I spent much of my time drinking in the woods, at keg parties, and alone, and in cars, and in parking lots, and hopelessly driving from one tavern to the next tavern to the next tavern, having one schooner in and one schooner out, claiming I'm not an alcoholic on the way in, and, upset with myself that I had a beer and I'm an alcoholic on the way out. Anyway, 8 years of that, and I was hopelessly done. Miserable. My last drunk was a pretty weak suicide attempt. I mean, you can't really kill yourself on beer. It's pretty hard, but I wanted to. It was, I had good intentions. And they were talking to me about intervention because I had done a number of things that would lead people around me to conclude that I probably had a problem with alcohol. And there's lots of stories in those 8 years about what had happened. And so the next morning, after that last drunk, I went to work. I was framing houses at the time. And I came home after work, and guess who was there? The intervention counselor, my parents, my fiance, a couple of buddies. Took me to treatment. Went kicking and screaming in treatment. It's like you mentioned, not an idea that came to me easily. I was not stoked about it. I thought my world was over. I thought, what am I going to do? I knew no other way of life. And, but I agreed. There was an inkling that it might be true, that there was a problem. I had heard, my dad had told me about his mother. She was a drunk. She died when I was a teenager, and we never went to the funeral. He was mad at his mom, He never introduced me to her. And I said to him later, I said, "Dad, how come you never introduced me to your mom?" And he goes, "Because she was a drunk." And I says, "Well, I'm a drunk. I probably liked her." We would probably been fast friends, I think, if I'd have met her. But there was talk about alcoholism. I had an uncle that died of alcoholism when I was young. My grandmother, of course, she had died. I had a cousin that hung himself because he was an alcoholic, and he didn't pay taxes for like 25 years. And when the IRS got to him, he was just distraught about his choices in life and hung himself. Um, uncle that smoked himself to death, and drank and smoked himself to death at 50 years old. So there's plenty of stories that I knew that, if I drank too much, and again, on day one, I was informed by a peer, that if I liked alcohol too much, I could become an alcoholic. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what an alcoholic was. At some point in my career, I began to explain my behavior by claiming to be alcoholic. It had become an excuse. It became an explanation for the unexplainable. Well, why did you run into the lake? Well, because I'm an alcoholic. So, first night, last drunk, I go to treatment. In treatment, I'm there 3 or 4 days, and I'm reading more of Bill's story. Okay? Page 12. I got all the way to page 12 here. It's taken a while. 3 or 4 days into this treatment center. And if you guys are looking for how to stay sober long term, one day at a time, here's the answer. My friend suggested that what seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. I was a recovered Catholic, a runaway Catholic, did parochial school my whole life. When I was 19, I ran as far as I could get from that stuff. I wrote a paper in junior college about the non-existence of God. I was pretty convinced I didn't want anything to do with it, but alcohol is a great persuader. It goes on to say, it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point upon a foundation of complete willingness. I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Question mark. Of course I would. I was convinced that maybe not absolutely consciously comprehending or understanding what I had agreed was possible, agreed that willingness was key, agreed in that moment that a higher power might be a solution. No clue what that meant long term. What I did recognize after some time of being sober was a moment that mattered in that treatment center when I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And since then, I've enlarged my understanding of what surrender is and what willingness is. And I boil it down to that it's not a one and done. I think we all want the answer. Boom, I'm smart, hip, slick, and cool. I got the world by the tail, but with a downhill drag. I got this figured out. If I just do it this way and that way, and go right to the meetings, and I call my sponsor, and I do shit down, and everything, it's going to be fine. And I'm here to tell you that the moment to inhale willingness to surrender and exhale surrender is a physical manifestation of acceptance of powerlessness, of you fill in the blank of whatever it is in life that one needs to overcome. The solution to all of the things that I've overcome in my life have started with an inhalation of willingness and an exhalation of surrender, of letting go to God's will, of letting go to the process of writing, of letting go to calling on the telephone. I was probably 20 years sober before I really, really understood the power of the telephone. During COVID, my sponsor and I talked damn near every day for a couple of years. I got involved in because I wasn't doing Zoom meetings. I got creeped out by Zoom. I just couldn't do it. So I stayed in touch with program people on a Zoom call, but it was kind of a closed situation. So this notion of willingness as being indispensable, that if I was to leave you with anything, it would be endeavoring to practice the physicality of that. Is really important. It's so vital in everything that I try to do today, whether it's like mowing the yard or doing something I don't want to do, or paying another bill that bothers me, or making a tough phone call to people, or working with a client. I really need the physicality of understanding that exhaling, letting go is the cornerstone of all that comes after that in recovery. So that's the real kicker for me. The step 2 decision, man, that gave me about 10 years of grace. So I'm going to start talking about some stuff that happened to me in sobriety. I got a few minutes left. The first thing I did, because I was unconscious mostly as an individual, that doesn't have a whole lot to do with alcoholism necessarily, just growing up in an abusive household. I'm going to come up with some conclusions of the mind. We call them defects of character. So anyway, my best thinking was I married a woman that didn't like me. And that was because it just made sense. Here's somebody that just tells me I'm a piece of shit every day. And God, I love that shit. That really makes sense to me. And it was still, that deal lasted 17 years. And I'll tell you that, if you're not suicidal after that one. So I survived that, got into another chaotic deal. I don't know if she liked me or not. At that point, I didn't like me. I was pretty convinced that what I thought about myself was actually true, that I really was a piece of shit, that I really was stupid, that I really couldn't succeed at life, that I really wasn't socially capable, that there was a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't deserve. These are conclusions that I've discovered after a stack of journals and a bunch of sponsors and all this stuff, where I was able to uncover, but after years and years of daily inventory writing and telephone work and meetings and this and that and other thing, I found out that I guess I don't really deserve to feed myself. And these are conclusions, defects. I don't deserve to get paid. I'm a classic under-earner cat that, when people tell me how much money they make, I go, how the fuck do you do that? So anyway, defects of character are difficult to uncover, and there's some glaring ones. In early recovery, there's some stuff that shows up that we all like. Yeah, you probably shouldn't drink and drive. That's pretty clear, right? The ones that were eating my lunch were the conclusions about who I was that I was unconscious of, that I was making decisions unconsciously, traveling down the road, going to work every day, getting married, whatever I'm supposed to be doing, unaware as to why I was doing it. If you wanted to get me to jump and run fast and just tell me I was stupid. If you told me I was stupid, I would do anything to prove you wrong. Or if you told me that I needed to prove myself, which they used to do back when I was in construction, that was a classic frickin' way that they get you to, well, you need to prove yourself. And after getting laid off like 5 Christmases in a row, I finally decided, you know what, I'm kind of done proving myself. Honestly, if you don't like me, fuck yourself. But it was the unconscious beliefs about who I was as a person that were eating my lunch, and that stuff started to get identified in my 13th year of sobriety. I was out of Bellevue. I was like, okay, these people are way too pretty for me. I am done. My life is shit, and I hate everything about what I'm doing and where I'm at and the people over there, and all the meetings suck. So I was driving to Des Moines to go to meetings in South King County. And I ran into a cat, Jay Ackney, and he was the first guy to describe to me, I was 13 years clean. I've done inventories. I've been to all the best meetings with the designer water and the great cookies and all the rest of it. And I had all the great sponsors. I did all the right shit. And I was in all the right service positions. But I wanted to die again. And I really didn't want to be here. 13 years clean. And I ran into Jay down there as a football player. The guy was a monster. Former football player. And he kind of, picked me up by the shoulder, like he's one of those kind of guys, like, hey, do what I tell you. He wrote in the book, he says, I forgive Mom and Mom forgives me. I tell you, it's got to start somewhere. You got to figure out a way to first be angry, because our inventory and our first step of our recovery program starts with I resent. And if we're going to play chameleon, and if we're going to play, oh, they did the best they could, that BS, oh, my parents did this or that, they were the best they could. If we don't allow ourselves to be angry, we're not going to recover. At least that wasn't my story. I mean, I needed to understand that what happened to me wasn't necessarily fair. But I also needed, on the other side of that, was to forgive as well. And so I did this meditation that he'd asked me to do. And it was a fairly thorough inventory. So I forgive Mom and Mom forgives me 70 times, written, 7 days in a row. In the margins, you write the resentments. After you get done writing the resentments, you write the first 3 columns. Okay? I did my mom, my dad, my 2 brothers, job, fiance, wife, whatever she was at that time. I don't know. I think we're still married. It ended up being like some kind of crazy 100 and something page inventory. But the story really, what I'd really like to say about this was Jay was the guy that told me that self-seeking was, I have a defective character. I don't deserve to get paid, for instance. This is pretty lightweight. I could talk about it. I don't deserve to get paid. So what I would do is I would chase employers down that would underpay me. And then I'd be resentful. Well, you didn't, it's time for a raise. And, they wouldn't want to give me an extra $1 an hour at the time, right? But in my inventory, I discovered that I was the one unconsciously believing that I didn't deserve to get paid. So I was endeavoring to stay and prove myself again and again and again to the wrong people. Okay. And Jay was that guy that shared with me that my defects were unconscious choices, unconscious decisions about who I was as a person that motivated behavior. Okay? This is the crux of it. If you want to know why you keep doing shit that you don't want to do, I'd suggest finding someone who understands unconscious defects of character and really, really delve deeper into what motivates behavior. We don't walk across the room until we make a decision to do it. I'm going to step here, I'm going to step there, I'm going to stand up straight, I'm going to say hello, I'm going to raise my right hand. Okay, these are choices. If you're making choices like I did for decades, unconsciously, and then waking up 6 months or a year later, or in my case, I was 2 years sober and woke up married. I was getting a 2-year cake up there at the First Congregational, 8th and 108th, up in Bellevue, and I was come to the place, they give you a little blue cake or some crap, and it was the tradition. I can't remember what color it was, but it was just a little cake, and I just woke up. Like I came to like some awarenesses in that moment. Like, oh shit, I've been married for 6 months. I'm 2 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and here I am, and there's all these people here. I'm not bullshitting you at all. Like it was just this. I just woke up in AA, 2 years sober. What had happened in the previous 2 years is unknown to me. I was just walking around in this unconsciousness, just doing what I'm supposed to do, just like a rat on a treadmill, going to work every day, working too hard, doing what I'm supposed to do, but not knowing why I'm doing any of it. So Jay helped me out, and the power and the presence of people who love you in Alcoholics Anonymous is a very, very real thing. This dude had to go back to Phoenix, and he didn't tell me why. But he would fly back to Seattle to hear my inventory. And he flew back 2 different times. And he'd get a hotel room, and we'd work for hours on my goddamn inventory that was 100+ pages long, getting through this stuff with me once and for all. And finally, he went home, and I hadn't heard from him for a while. And I called his number, and his son answered the phone, and he said that Jade passed away. Jay had cancer and was flying back from Phoenix to hear my inventory. And he knew he was dying of cancer. But he was getting on a plane to talk to me. Whew. That's a trip, So I want to be like Jay. I want to be that guy that goes to any lengths I suppose. I really value Alcoholics Anonymous. I am blessed that I was given the billionth of a second of willingness that said, I don't want to be a drunk. I want to live my life. The billionth of a second that said, you know what? I think I'm going to find an employer that will pay me properly. The billionth of a second that said, you know what? I'm going to try to find a woman that loves me, that cares about me, that likes me for me. You know what? The billionth of a second that said, you know what? I'm going to start making better choices about how I spend my time and the people I hang out with and what I do. Give it a try, people. Give it a try. Give willingness a shot. Clayton, I'm an alcoholic.
Thanks, Clayton.